This podcast is recorded on the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. We extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening today.
Hello and welcome to Give and Toke Cannabis Conversations, the show that aims to elevate the conversation about cannabis to a higher level. I'm your host Paul, and today I'm joined by Alice Davy, who is a medical cannabis patient using plant medicine to aid in her treatment of endometriosis and multiple sclerosis. In addition to being a patient advocate, she's a supermum to 2 boys and has recently been working with the Legalised Cannabis Victoria Party to talk about the positive impacts cannabis has had on her life. This is because the Legalised Cannabis Party has presented a bill amendment to the Victorian Parliament to change our discriminatory drug driving laws to allow medical cannabis patients to drive without fear of losing their licence. Though I've done my best to introduce her, let's hear Rachel Payne, MP from the Legalised Cannabis Party, talk about Alice in Parliament.
Alice Davy is a 33-year-old mother of 2. Her eldest is primary school aged and her youngest is now almost 2 years old. Alice sadly suffers from multiple sclerosis. Without medication, she visibly tremors. But with medicinal cannabis, she is steady and she can function. As a young mother and as a driver of a motor vehicle. Alice is prescribed an unimpairing CBD medication that she microdoses during the day. She takes a single dose of medicinal THC at night before sleep. Under that treatment regime, she is unimpaired and safe to drive approximately 6 hours before she takes the wheel for her morning school run. And she would never compromise the safety of her young family. Alice is acting responsibly and taking the most effective treatment for her conditions to live the best and most functional life she possibly can for her and her young family. She shouldn't be punished for that. A roadside drug test that detects the trace amount of THC in her system should not cost her a financial penalty and the mandatory loss of her driver's license. Alice is the reason our driving laws should change. She's not alone. Thousands of other Victorians find themselves in a comparable situation each day. In fact, in Victoria, there have been over 4,300 prescriptions for medicinal cannabis issued in February this year alone. This needs to be a priority, and we need to find a solution for these patients.
If you enjoy what you hear on the show today, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating and review on your podcast platform of choice. Tell a friend about the show and make sure that you like, subscribe, follow and all that biz. But for now, please welcome to the show, Alice Davy. Now, you and I have been internet friends for a little while now, but I'm really excited to have the public face of the roadside drug testing campaign on the show. Tell us about your experience working alongside the Legalised Cannabis Party.
Yeah, I've never been one to keep up with politics and what's happening in Parliament, but when it comes to cannabis and their driving laws, it directly affects me. Changing the driving laws is vital. If these laws don't change, I will forever be at risk every single day getting in my car of losing my license. You would find it hard to find a medicinal cannabis patient who would ingest their THC oil or flower and then get in a car and drive. Why? Because we need this to live and survive. So why would we risk our lives for others on the road impaired?
You're exactly right. I've never once consumed cannabis and gone, I'm going to jump in the car and go off somewhere, because I've purposely chosen to use that thing, whether recreational when I was in Canada or therapeutically and medically now that I'm at home in Australia. We aren't looking to be able to get into a car, stoned and get on the roads. It's the last thing you want to do. And that's a great point. You actually have these implications for your life, for your sons, for your children. So this discrimination doesn't just affect you, it affects them.
That's exactly right.
So before we talk in depth about your cannabis use, let's dive straight into your medical history. This is, a very deep topic and a very broad topic and a very personal topic. So thank you so much for being here to talk about it. So what are your conditions?
So I have severe endometriosis, adenomyosis, a pituitary tumor, which I've had my whole life, which I'm now in remission for. And I 100% think that is because of cannabis. Anxiety, and recently multiple sclerosis. I've been sick pretty much my whole life.
One of the conditions I'm contacted the most about is actually endometriosis, but the common thread for me is that there seems to be such little reliable information out there. With that being said, though, cannabis is something that is regularly being used to treat it, so there's clearly something to this. So let's first start with endometriosis. What is it and how does it impact your daily life?
Okay, so this is what everyone needs to get right, and I hope I get it right. So endometriosis is a systemic inflammatory disease characterized at surgery by the presence of endometrium-like tissue found outside the uterus, usually with an associated inflammatory process. It is a spectrum disease with a variety of subtypes and clinical presentations and pain, inflammation, infertility, development of endometriomas, which are chocolate cysts, fibrosis, and formation of adhesions, and other organ dysfunction, such as GI issues, and just so much more. This disease is found on every organ of the body and is not a reproductive condition or just a women's disease.
Thank you for that great definition there. And I really appreciate the work you do online and the advocacy you do sharing content. But what I continue to learn is even the information about endometriosis is conflicting. The medical advice, the online advocates, there's such a push and pull between kind of what it is, how to tackle it. And it's so unfortunate that the common thread seems to be the medical field knows so little about women's bodies and how they're affected. 1 in 9 women develop endometriosis in Australia by their 40s, and it causes tens of thousands of hospitalizations every year. Yet it seems to be something we don't really talk about. So it's such important work that you're putting this information out there.
Yeah, there's so many of us putting it out there, and sometimes we feel like we're screaming into the void, but we're getting there, really, because when I was diagnosed 10 years ago, I had no direction. There was nothing. Instagram wasn't even a thing when it's like talking about endo. So I just started connecting with people around the world.
So one of the things that I've come to understand is that often an endometriosis diagnosis is missed. And according to the government's health website, it can take about 7 years on average to actually get that diagnosis. So what was that process like for you? Like, when did you start noticing these problems and how long did it take to get that care?
Well, when I think back and I talk with my surgeons now, I was 11 when I got my first period and it was horrible. It felt like I was giving birth. And it wasn't until after my first son was born that it kind of like kicked my endo into gear, and it was just everyday pain. I was diagnosed within the first year of his life.
Wow. So what are some of the symptoms you experience?
Oh gosh, my life has been so impacted by endo, disabling abdominal and pelvic pain, fatigue, nausea, vomiting, GI issues. Just for example, during ovulation, my body temperature sits at 34.5 to 35 degrees. I have breathing problems, cough up blood, stabbing pain in my ovaries, in my back, standing and then going, oh my God, I'm going to pass out, like in the middle of work. Then the nausea came, then the chronic fatigue was absolutely mental. And I had a baby to take care of.
Yeah, which in itself is a cause for anxiety and fatigue and tiredness and heaviness.
Exactly.
And lacking sleep. So, as I read the symptoms of endo and MS and I see a lot of the crossover between those symptoms, I just can't imagine what it's like to also try and, function as a human being. And I think that really speaks to the core of the challenge of these disabilities is obviously everyone struggles with something, but these are such low visibility conditions, but so overwhelming and enveloping.
Exactly. They are overwhelming. They're so unpredictable, especially MS. That's unpredictable every day. I could be fine today and tomorrow I might wake up with no vision. Endo is the same in a different way. You could go out for a night out or go for a run or eat something that's an inflammatory in food and you're paying for it for days later. Like, I'm intolerant to almost everything now. Most people I talk to, it is a night out. I don't even drink alcohol anymore because it will flare on my endo so bad.
It is interesting. I think the more people grow up, the more they realize the negative impacts that alcohol have on them. You know, whether you're experiencing conditions or not, it becomes pretty apparent as you grow that this is truly poison.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like I used to think that you'd have to drink when you're out to have a good time. But now I don't need that.
Some of the symptom crossovers with MS and endo are pretty similar. You know, you spoke about fatigue and things like that, and spasticity of muscles, memory problems, balance, vision impairment. How have pharmaceuticals aided either your endometriosis or multiple sclerosis? What was your initial journey there like?
Well, with pharmaceuticals, okay, this is a bit of a different story. I started off taking codeine in high school, and I'd had GI issues and chest pain using that. By my high teens, I was addicted to this because it wouldn't treat my pain, so I'd take more. It wasn't until my first son was born, like I said, it initially kick-started my endometriosis, and the pain went to every single day. And by the time he was 6 months old, I was prescribed Endone, OxyContin, and Valium for the first time. The first week on Oxy, my eyes rolled in the back of my head. It was a very frightening experience. This continued with fentanyl added in, an anti-nausea medication, until I was maxed out by about 2017. This was no way to live, and I was just begging my doctors to give me something that was not drugs. So I had a spinal cord stimulator implanted in that same year to manage the endo pain, and I was the first person to have that done because it is not for that type of pain. It's for nerve pain, and it blew my surgeon's mind when it actually worked for me. So I wanted to be essentially pharmaceutical free, and it did change my life to a degree. And then, so I obviously reduced my pharmaceutical use by, 80%, I think.
Wow.
And then I started looking at medicinal cannabis in 2019, after my dear friend who has terminal cancer offered me some of hers. Within 6 months, my need for pharmaceuticals was pretty much gone, except for those major endo flare-ups. And even that, I was just taking tramadol. And I now only have tramadol when I can't access my cannabis, being, too expensive to have all of it. Because my cannabis doctor has prescribed it for me to have 24/7, which, as you know, it's very expensive to have all of those products.
Something you mentioned there really, sparked something in me, and that is that need for someone to actually kind of illegally give you theirs to try out. And unfortunately, we understand a lot about the abuse of pharmaceutical drugs, but with cannabis, this is something that is so essential because of the restrictions and the barriers. So often we do have to give someone some of our medication or vice versa, so they can actually experience that for the first time.
Exactly. Like, she just kept saying to me, she's like, Al, you have to get a prescription for this. You have to do this. And I'm so glad I did, because even now, post-surgery, whether that's my spinal surgery or my endo surgeries, I take cannabis post-op instead of fentanyl. And some doctors are like, how are you sitting up right now talking?
And that speaks a little bit to the hesitation. I was talking to my partner just this morning about how I'd asked my local pharmacy about getting medical cannabis in, and they just went, no. Like, I've never heard the word no more times in my life. And it was really quite confronting, and they didn't ask any questions. They weren't curious what I use it for. It was just this immediate dismissal. So even that shock that, oh my God, this thing works, speaks volumes about where we're at.
And there's still so many pharmacists and doctors that are hesitant.
Yeah, that's right. It's going to come with the territory. You just hope that there's at least a willingness to try and understand it. Like, if I'm going to be told no by someone, I want a good reason.
Yeah, exactly. Not just no because they're scared of what other people might think. I don't know.
I think it's the College of Pain Doctors that keeps getting quoted by opponents of cannabis. It's just that kind of one institution that says no, all these people cling on to it so desperately.
Well, even my pain doctor was 100% for it. Yeah, he's like, if this is working for you, then go for it.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
I was reading your Instagram stories about multiple sclerosis, and something that I found really ironic is how much you would benefit from a legal, regulated, kind of recreational market. Because one of the things you were asking for was CBD bath bombs, and they're something that I loved using in Canada, but not something we can even get in the medical field. So,
no, you can get black market ones here, but you can't get them on prescription.
Exactly. And that's something I really want people to understand. That legal regulated market is not just so we can go and get some, high THC joint to get messed up on the weekend.
Exactly.
That market actually completely complements the medical market. Like when I was in Canada, I was using a lot of those products therapeutically. Thankfully, I didn't need to go to a doctor. There was no middleman. I could go try that CBD vape pen, that topical cream, whatever it might be. And these are things we just cannot get.
Well, that is what got me through my pregnancy with my second son. So I originally was with Tetra Health in Sydney before I switched to Astrid, who I love. And they wouldn't prescribe it for me. And I thought, you're telling me to go back on pharmaceuticals, which my baby would not be my baby when he was born with how much I was on. So that is when I had a friend who actually bought into a company in America, like CBD bath bombs, like it's all CBD, topical creams. And I would just buy all of those. And I had a CBD bath every night and put that all over my belly. And it's the only thing that would stop the pain.
And again, you had to source these products illegally, even though they work.
And the difference between like what pharmaceuticals were going to do to me and my baby over what cannabis would do to me and my baby, the data on that, the only story I could find out of America was when my child was 15 or in adolescence, could possibly have developmental delays. Now, my son is 2 and he can count in 3 different languages and he speaks like nothing I've ever seen before. And he was a full cannabis baby.
Wow, that's amazing. And that's something you said to me very early on. Like this kid would not be here if it weren't for cannabis.
Exactly. He would not be here.
I want to circle back a little bit to that spinal cord stimulator, because what really stood out to me was that you said you're one of the first people to get that. What is that procedure and what is it usually used for? So
it's usually used for people with nerve pain, sciatic pain, people that have had back injuries, and a lot of people only, 60 and over. But the guy that took mine in, he services Victoria and New South Wales, and he said we haven't done this before because endo is really, muscle pain, like it's not nerve pain. But in saying that, your nerve endings are firing off all of the time when you are in such chronic pain. So, maybe it might work. 50-50, either that or it was going to be ketamine infusion. And I said, no bloody way am I having that. So we did a trial, which is basically going into surgery, putting wires into your spine, and then the battery to that is just stuck to the outside of you to trial it for a week. And it is basically telling the brain that you're not in pain. Now, it's not all pain gone, but when those nerve endings are firing off pain, before it gets to the brain, it's telling your brain that pain is not there or it's not as bad as it is. I kept a pain diary, and by day 3, I was already not taking the endone that I was, the week prior. When I went back to my specialist, he was like, wow, I can't believe this worked. And he said to me at the start, he goes, if this decreases your pain by at least 40%, that's a win. So I went into this knowing that. And then, 2 months later, I had it actually implanted. So that's into the spine, fixed into your T8 and T10, I think. And then the battery is then put down in your bottom, essentially, in the muscle there. And it was a major surgery. And that took about 6 months to heal. That was when I started, going to wean off of these strong pain meds. But it wasn't 100% take away my pain. And I thought, no, I'm not going back on pain meds like I was. And that's when my friend was like, you need to try this. And that's when I started using medicinal cannabis.
That's amazing. And we're going to really dive deep into kind of how you use cannabis, what products you use in just a moment. But, and please correct me, I understand you've had over 15 surgeries for these conditions.
Yeah.
Like this is one of them, and that was one major surgery. What have those 15 surgeries involved, and what kind of toll has that taken on you?
Well, actually, we didn't touch on this yet, the conflict of endometriosis and the definition in Australia and the treatment, basically. The only treatment for endometriosis is excision surgery, period. And excision is where surgeons cut the disease out of the root, basically, compared to ablation, which is where it's burning it off. Ablation has higher recurrence rates because you're not removing the disease properly. Many, many gynecologists in Australia do not have the training to visualise the disease and remove it properly, even though they claim to do. So at the moment, a bunch of surgeons in Sydney are claiming they can diagnose endo through ultrasound without need for surgery. Now, this is damaging because I've had 2 of these specialist ultrasounds, which are $500 each, and I have stage 4 endo, and even my scan did not reveal the extent of my endo. You need surgery, and you need a proper surgeon to do that. And it's only diagnosed through pathology. So with me, even though I do have an amazing surgeon who does have the training, he doesn't have the training like they do in America. Not everyone has the same stage of endo. I have it severe. And he does a great job of excising my disease. But early on, he just said, you are someone that's just going to have this so bad. And these 11 surgeries have been excising endo from the same places, or if not more. From when my son was born in 2021, I just had a surgery in November with a surgeon who's meant to be the top of endo care in Australia. It was not a good surgery. He opened me up, now it's been a couple of years since my last operation, and he opened me up and I was riddled with disease, adhesions, new spots that are rare, which aren't rare, and closed me back up and said, right, I will book you in for a hysterectomy. That's not going to cure the disease because it's not the uterus. But, it essentially is like a cancer. You can't die from this, but some days you wish that you were because it's horrible. You could be standing up fine and then an adhesion might wrap itself around your organs and you'll collapse. So my surgery has been for all of that.
I think this is an important time just to kind of reflect on that. And for me to just sincerely say thank you for sharing this, because I can't begin to imagine what this feels like. But I certainly hear in the challenge that you've gone through that I'm sure there are other people going through this confusing bullshit time as well. In addition to the plight of the condition itself, the frustration of the contradictions, the lack of knowledge, the cockiness of surgeons for surgeries that don't necessarily work. You're compounded not just by the struggles of the physicality, but also the emotional drain of what a battle this is to try and find good care.
It is. It's horrible. That's why I share the way I do and advocate the way that I do. Because like I said before, there wasn't anything like this 10 years ago when I was diagnosed. I was just like, what do I do? Whereas now there's hundreds of people from around this country, around the world, that have messaged me and asked for help. Like, I'm not a doctor, but I'm just giving them like my experience. And I get a lot of my advice and evidence and facts from doctors and surgeons and scientists in the States or India, around the world. And I go in sometimes now and inform my surgeon, and he does listen, but it's exhausting. And even this being Endometriosis Awareness Month, I'm already exhausted because every year I'm saying the same stuff, and so many of us are. And there's been many of us in the community that have had to completely leave because we've been bullied by surgeons, we've been bullied by medical professionals because we're telling the truth, and they don't want us in Australia getting that out there because, we can now diagnose off ultrasound and take this drug and it's a cure. No, it's not. Most of the time, these hormonal treatments are feeding our disease, not helping us. And I know that because I've been on all the treatments. Every treatment you could imagine or that's out there for endo, even ones in clinical trial stages, I've tried. And I'm riddled with this disease.
The way we approach medicine is incredibly binary, and so often we look for, here's the problem, here's the solution, whilst ignoring all the other variables and potential benefits. I had Dr. Matty Moore on the show a few months ago, and one of the...
Yeah, he's awesome.
Oh, he's amazing. And one of the things that really stuck with me is people are coming in for one condition and it's fixing something else. So it either fixes a couple of things or it doesn't fix the thing they came for, but they're now getting some sleep. So the pain isn't fixed, but they're sleeping for the first time in 20 years. And that doesn't really sit well with our medical field in the West.
No.
We expect things to have a rather binary result. Here's the problem. Here's the solution. All right, that medication didn't work. Let's try the next one in line.
I can speak from that because of how many tablets I was on prior to cannabis, because let's give you endone for your pain. But then now she's got nausea, so we'll need medication for that. And the endone is keeping her awake, so let's give her a sleeping tablet. And now she's got anxieties from all of this and being so sick and in pain. Let's give her some Valium. I understand what Maddie was talking about here, because when I switched to cannabis, there's no need for all of that. I take cannabis. That's it.
You made no secret of not being a doctor, not being a scientist, but doing all this research. And it comes from a place of care, and that's the conflict. You care about this. You've lived this. Doctors that see the information you're sharing and are inexplicably triggered by it.
Yeah, because they don't have lived experience.
That's right.
They went to uni as a healthy person and, oh, I might go in this field and not actually listen to their patients. We're not going in there going, we're doctors, we know what's happening, but we do know. Because when you have a condition like this, you just don't sit there and go, oh, my doctors will figure it out. Endo's been around for a very long time.
Even as I looked at the Australian government's health website where they talk about endometriosis,
Oh.
the last line triggered me so much that I don't even have endometriosis. But it was, if you're living with endometriosis, make sure you get plenty of sleep, exercise regularly, and reduce stress as much as possible.
Yes, and, drink green tea, do yoga, and shove kale up your bum. That's what they say is going to fix us. No, I'm not kidding.
It's so rough because, Alice, by no means is my medical condition anywhere near as distressing and physically expressive as yours is. But I experience similar things with anxiety and depression, and it's the same advice. It's get some sleep, do some yoga, try not to stress. Oh, hey, don't worry about it. It's not how it works.
That's not how it works at all.
Well, I am very keen to dive into your cannabis use and what your program is and what you found effective, because you said pretty much all you're using now is cannabis, and I can't wait to find out more. But I want to break up this conversation a little bit. Your Instagram handle is Alice in Endoland. So I want to play a little game today about none other than Alice in Wonderland. How do you feel about that?
Oh, God. Yeah, good. We'll see how we go.
Awesome. All right. So this is a 10-question quiz. Let's see how you do with Alice in Wonderland. Question 1. What is the White Rabbit's catchphrase? Is it, I'm late, I'm late, I'm late? Hippo, 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 or hurry up, hurry up, hurry up?
I'm late, I'm late, I'm late.
That is correct. Why does Alice shrink? Because she is stepped on? Because Batman makes her shrink? Because she drinks a potion?
She drinks a potion.
Oh, 2 from 2, you are killing it. What is the Queen's full name? Queen of Hearts, Queen of Diamonds, or Queen of Spades?
Queen of Hearts.
What game does Alice play? Golf, football, or croquet?
Croquet.
My gosh, you are on fire. What does Alice use to play croquet? A cat bat and a dog ball, an elephant paddle and a mouse ball, or a flamingo club and a hedgehog ball?
Flamingo club and a hedgehog ball.
All right, you're at 50%. You're at the passing grade. Bon Jovi point, halfway there, living on a prayer. Number 6. Which animal does Alice follow into Wonderland? A mouse, a rabbit, or a frog?
A rabbit.
Excellent. How does Alice get into Wonderland? She jumps in the sea, she climbs in a teapot, she falls down a hole.
She falls down a hole.
On fire. Question 8. Who wrote Alice's Adventures in Wonderland? Was it Kathy Cassidy, Lewis Carroll, or Jacqueline Wilson?
Oh, you got me here.
Yes.
Kathy Cassidy?
That one is incorrect. You ruined your perfect record, but you've still absolutely killed this so far. The correct answer is Lewis Carroll. We all watched the cartoon and the movie anyway. We weren't really reading the book, let's be honest.
No.
All right, number 9. Who played the Mad Hatter in Tim Burton's film version of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland? Was it Johnny Depp, Lewis Carroll, or Katy Perry?
Johnny Depp.
That is correct. All right, lucky last. What coloured dress does Alice wear? Orange and pink, purple and green, or blue and white?
Blue and white.
That is correct, and you got 9 out of 10. That was awesome.
Yay.
Well done. Good job. All right. Moving back to our conversation about cannabis, I really want to get stuck into explicitly how you use cannabis to treat your endometriosis, to manage your multiple sclerosis. How has that treatment worked out for you? Have you found a crossover for treating the two conditions, or do they remain relatively separate?
They're relatively separate without cannabis. So basically, endo loves heat, MS loves cold. So heat packs and everything for endo, I've had to lay off because it could flare up my MS, hot baths, all of that stuff. So that I've found very quickly a balance. But when it comes to cannabis, it fixes all of my conditions. You know, without cannabis, I have a severe tremor with my MS and the chronic pain with endo, nausea, not having any appetite. Prior to cannabis, I was severely underweight. So with cannabis, my tremor is gone, completely gone. I don't have it at all. But if I don't have cannabis for up to a week, then the tremor will come back.
So Rachel Payne spoke about it in Parliament that you use a non-intoxicating CBD during the day and a THC oil at night. Do you have a broader spectrum of products than that, or is that basically the core of it?
Yes, I have 100 milligrams of CBD wafers up to 8 times a day.
Wow.
They're a new product about 6 months ago. They're awesome. Prior to that, it was oil. And then I vape my 27% THC flower at night. And then I also use, so when I have horrible endo and cervix pain, I use the Ananda Hemp Endo Release CBD cream, and it is fantastic. Like, it's amazing. And then I also make my own suppositories out of oil when I have the rectum pain from endo, because I've got bowel endometriosis. So yeah, I just use a bit of everything.
That's an amazing array of products. And to think that you're using 800 milligrams of CBD a day, that just proves that, you know, those high dosages are needed. And one of the really frustrating things that we're seeing in Australia right now is the TGA have approved over-the-counter CBD products, but in order to approve manufacturers, there's this, as is needed, testing going on.
Yes.
However, the dosage has been limited at 10 milligram doses to see if that's effective for sleep. Now, anyone who's used CBD knows that that is generally not an effective amount.
No.
For me, I would use 10 to 30 milligrams just as a general anxiety management. It's not putting me to sleep. It's not there to do anything but calm me down.
Yeah.
So this is the hypocrisy and the challenge. You're using 80 times the amount they're testing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that is what gets me through the day. Otherwise, my joints ache. Then the sacrum pain comes, the back pain, but even my anxiety, because we know what CBD does for, inflammatory in the body. That is why I take it all day. THC is for sleep and so I can eat.
Would you use THC products during the day more if these roadside drug testing laws change? Like, is that something you're kind of withholding or holding off from?
Yeah, because even though if I use high doses, I still wouldn't get in the car and drive during the day, but it's in my head. Like, even though it wears off, when you smoke the high THC, within 5 minutes it's in your system and it starts working. So for me, it works. It wears off in a couple of hours, maybe even 2, I think, and I'm feeling back, sort of back to normal. But say if I had to have that in the morning and then the school rang after lunch and said, you need to come pick up your son, then I would be fine to go. But I internally be going, oh my God, I can't, which is why I don't at the moment. Like I've said to my doctors plenty of times, I'd feel so much better if I was able to have my THC during the day, because I could have it through my vape, have a nap, and wake up fine. Whereas the oil is about 6 to 8 hours where you're really affected. And I was talking to a girl the other day in the endo community. She's changed to flower at night too, because the oil, we'd have it at 9 o'clock. And then by 1 a.m. you're starving, got the munchies, because the oil is starting to work. And I'm like, I can't keep eating in the middle of the night. I want to go to sleep, but I have to eat to gain weight. So I'm so glad that the flower exists. But yeah, it's just all about, like, it's so important. And what a lot of people don't understand is how you ingest it, is how it affects you.
So often, flour has actually worn off around the time oil is doing its work. That's why there is a need to use different products and find things that work for you.
When I started, there was oil. That was it. And not many brands of it either.
Yeah, and like if you're someone, one of my best friends, he uses it for spasms and leg tremors. Now, if you're waiting for an hour and a half for an oil to kick in, it's kind of defeated the purpose and you've just worn yourself out even more.
It does, yeah.
Whereas almost instantly, within 3 to 5 seconds of consuming flour via vape or smoking, those spasms have ended.
Exactly. That's the same for me. I have the spasms as well, and involuntary movements, which your friend would have exactly the same. And with smoking it, they're pretty much gone within like 20 minutes.
It's just amazing, and it's just incredible that we're still fighting so hard for the basics to be understood by, our lawmakers, by doctors, as we've discussed.
Yeah.
We know the opponents lean on outdated information, incorrect information, social stigmas, prohibition. Even Dan Andrews, who's, being patted on the back right now for saying that these roadside drug laws need to be changed. He's still espousing these ideas that legalization would be disrespectful to people that have psychosis, and all the work we've done with the mental health review would affect that. But then there seems to be this kind of complete disregard for the people with mental health issues that are benefiting from cannabis use.
Just for like clarity sort of on that, I guess, in 2021 when my son was born, I had my first, what later on was told that was my first MS relapse. He was 23 days old, and I went into hospital with severe pain and bleeding and endo problems, but I couldn't speak properly. I couldn't articulate. I didn't know what was going on, but something wasn't right. And I've got diagnosed anxiety and depression, so I know mental health. And this one hospital, major hospital in Melbourne, told me I had postpartum psychosis, and it was my cannabis was causing the problem, and I overdosed on that. It's almost physically impossible to overdose on cannabis. So they shoved all these antipsychotics down my throat, just all this stuff. And the lights were on when no one was home. I could not speak. I was almost dribbling. And they wanted to give me like that to go home, to be with 2 children on my own. And I'm like, this will sedate me. And then I kept presenting every month the same thing. And then their narrative changed. Oh, postpartum psychosis isn't there. If I had cannabis use. And I finally got to a good hospital, and they presented exactly the same. And they said, there's no postpartum psychosis here. And I was diagnosed with MS 3 days later.
Again, what a burden that's adding to an already challenging time. And this is such a fatal flaw of our medical system. For whatever reason, whether it's lack of funding, lack of care, being overworked, I'm sure it's absolutely ridiculous working in a hospital right now. Irrespective of COVID, I'm sure it's been difficult for a long time. But the lack of questions being asked and the assumptions and the impositions put on you stop good care being given.
And this is why what happened to me happened, because I'm such a big advocate. And I just kept kicking and screaming. I said, I know what a mental health condition is, and that's not this. But I said, what about the people who can't speak? If you gave them this and that's not, like, I wasn't even physically assessed. They looked at me and went, oh, she's not talking properly. Her memory's all over the place. I was tremoring and everything. And they were just went, oh, no, mental health condition, straight up to psych.
It's so upsetting. And,
it is.
There's not really much we can say, but it does just emphasize the point to need to get a second, third, fourth, fifth opinion.
Which
sometimes.
Is why I went to many hospitals. Yeah.
And power to you, Alice. And I hope that inspires other people to do the same. Know that you're not going crazy. Know that you're not on an island here. Know that there's people that have experienced the same and worse. So thank you so much for sharing that information and that.
That's okay.
I'm so glad that you persisted and that you're here with us today to have this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
What was your relationship with cannabis prior to using it medically and therapeutically? Did you have it? Did you have any experience as a teenager or anything like that?
Yeah, I smoked a few joints when I was 15, and I greened out so hard. My skin would crawl. I felt disgusting. So I never touched it again. So I was reluctant to try medicinal cannabis for that reason. But I'm so glad I did, because it changed and saved my life. I never had any of those effects. And I've never had a side effect from cannabis. And I'm someone who has a rare side effect, to every pharmaceutical.
That's a huge shift, because that's a common thread, that 15, 16, try it, have too much, green out, pass out, throw up, have a shit time, whatever it might be. Yet it's amazing. The additional thread is people's ability to then come back and try it in a different way. Like, to have that experience can be such a turn off.
Yes.
And it's such a typical first experience, excess in our teen years. I could write a whole book about that, but it is important to kind of give it a go in a different light. And that is the thing I love about medical cannabis. Like, I am so desperate for legalization and a regulated framework, so that whatever day of the week, just like when I lived in Vancouver, from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m., there's dozens of stores open where I can get a cannabis product. That is still the goal. But I am incredibly grateful for Australia's approach to medical cannabis, the careful consideration, the mindfulness that comes into it, because I do look at cannabis a little bit differently now than I did in Canada. Like, it was therapeutic and useful, but it's far more mindful and purposeful now. And I think there's a real benefit to that as someone who does enjoy it recreationally. So I think we're lucky to be at the stage we're at.
We definitely are. There's still a long way to go, but, we're definitely moving in the right direction. I think a lot quicker in the last 2 years, even through the pandemic. And it's places like Astrid. I've got friends that have contacted me from the other side of the world, and they're like, where do you get your cannabis from? Who's your pharmacist? This, and this. And I've got friends in Queensland that get their scripts from Astrid, because I just share it all the time. I said, I love them. And like you said, this is not an ad. I've just been going there since Lisa opened. They're everyone's so lovely. And when I was going through Chemist Warehouse to get my scripts filled, I felt anxious.
Yep.
When I was ringing up to fill my script. Whereas when I walk into Astrid, it's like, hey, going? Yep, the script's there, ready to go. And off I go. Yeah,
you see a friendly face, you see a familiar face, and you're treated like a human being, and you don't, you get to kind of enjoy the experience of going. And that is testament to the dispensary experience in Canada, and, to some extent America and other places that have even decriminalized around the world, like Spain and Portugal. There's something very soul soothing about walking into a space that is accepting of something that works for you. It's that feeling most people get going into BWS or Liquorland. Just that it's almost a normalcy. Like, after a while of going to Astrid, it stops feeling special, but that's in a good way. Like, it feels normal. It feels fine. It feels okay. Yeah, it's just like you're going to your local anywhere. That's how it feels when you go to Astrid now. Well, I have a couple more questions for you, and I think they might actually kind of link to the last segment, which is Pauls of Wisdom, where you kind of give one key takeaway for the listener, a bit of a dinner party fact. So I'm going to ask these questions and then give you the opportunity to give your Paul of Wisdom. They could be separate or they could be joined. But that's basically, What is your advice to folks with endometriosis who are interested in using cannabis? What's your advice to folks with MS who are interested in using cannabis? And what's your Paul of Wisdom? Again, they could be three separate things, or they could actually tie in together. The floor is yours. If you want to use medicinal cannabis, but your GP is not prescribing it, or, one of your specialists is against it, but you want this and you can see that it's saving other people's lives, then get a second opinion. Keep going. Don't just stop there, because I've had so many people in the endo and MS community asking, where did I go, because their GP knocked it back, or, their specialist said, no, don't do that. So I just think it's all about advocating for yourself, because cannabis is medicine that's proven every single day. That's fantastic. And what a wonderful point to wrap up on. Alice, I couldn't be more grateful for your vulnerability, your honesty, your authenticity, to share your experiences about endometriosis, multiple sclerosis, how that has impacted your life, your ability to raise kids. It's incredibly powerful. And this is a cannabis conversation and I've contributed where I can, but I hope the listener understands that these are the stories we need to hear. These are the people that make a difference. I'm just a guy that was a bud tender for a couple of years. I know, but Alice, you're such an incredible resource. And, you've admitted you're not a doctor, not a scientist, but it's clear that you're able to help people. So where can our listeners reach out to you online? Where can they ask you questions? Where can they find you? Well, thank you for the lovely words, and I'm so glad to be on here. So my Instagram is Alice in Endoland. That's where I talk to my people and link in with all these wonderful communities.
because really, like, those people are like my family. You know, with chronic illness, you don't get it until you get it.
Thank you again for sharing everything. I'll look forward to staying in touch with you and continuing to learn your story. You are the most stylish face of a drug driving program I've ever seen. I saw those interviews with The Guardian. I saw you on the news just looking stylish as hell.
Thanks.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Alice. Take care.
Thanks, Paul.
Give and Toke Cannabis Conversations is written and produced by me, Paul. Music written and produced by Big Mike. Follow us on Instagram @GiveAndToke or get in touch by emailing giveandtoke@gmail.com. You'll also find us on both Twitter and Facebook. All opinions expressed by program guests are solely their current opinions and do not necessarily reflect the position of Give and Toke. Content discussed in this show does not constitute medical advice. Cannabis is not legal everywhere, so please be aware of local laws.